question is on prophecy. And I'm comparing maybe the Old Testament concept of prophecy to what you find in the New Testament, particularly with Paul, where he, in that 1 Corinthians chapter 14, really goes into it and kind of elevates it high in the list of gifts of the Spirit. And what I was struck by, and I want your thoughts on this, he says prophecy is to encourage, strengthen, and comfort. Very specific, 3 things he speaks of. And nowhere is he talking about sort of end times, end of the age, all of that, which is so fashionable today. Whenever we talk of prophecy, it's always end times oriented. And it strikes me that Paul is looking at it in a very different way. What do you think?
Well, he is. If you're thinking of end times prophecies, usually when people are talking about prophecy in that sense of end times prophecies, they're talking about the written prophecies of the Bible, especially the Old Testament and maybe the book of Revelation, as they are seeing it. I don't, as you may know from listening to me, I don't think that there's very much in there about the end times, but I think the prophets were talking about things mostly that have already been fulfilled. But nonetheless, there's certainly a difference between a discussion of what's written in biblical prophecy on the one hand, and on the other hand, the gift of prophecy operating in the church, as Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians 14. Paul in 1 Corinthians 14 is not discussing exegesis of prophecy from the Bible, for example. He's not talking about Bible teachers expounding on written prophecies in the Bible. He's talking about people who are uttering prophecies, new prophecies that God is giving them by the Holy Spirit. And it's frankly, neither in biblical times nor in modern times have I ever found that most people prophesying in that sense are speaking about the end times. Now, I have known people who've claimed to know something about the timing of the coming of Christ, and I guess they think they're prophets or something like that. But the vast majority of prophecy given in charismatic circles has nothing to do with the end times. It has more to do with what Paul's talking about, encouraging and exhorting and comforting people, usually a word from the Lord concerning them in their present circumstances, rather than some prediction about the end times. And that was certainly the case also with the prophets in the Bible that we know about. We don't know very many. We know that Silas was called a prophet, and a few other people are called prophets, but Agabus is actually the only prophet in the New Testament of whom we have any samples of his prophecies. And in Acts chapter 11, he prophesied that a famine was coming soon, which did come in the reign of Claudius. And then later in the book of Acts, in the book of Acts later on, Agabus prophesied that Paul would be bound when he came to Jerusalem, which both of those prophecies had to do with the near-term future, nothing to do with the end times. So there is a difference between discussions of biblical prophecies, for example, the prophecy of Isaiah or Jeremiah or Ezekiel or Zechariah, or of the book of Revelation, on the one hand, and those who discuss the end times, and when they talk about end times prophecy, they're usually talking about prophecies that were written by biblical prophets in biblical times, whereas the gift of prophecy, which is in the churches, and that's what Paul's describing in 1 Corinthians 14, is really not really the same thing. It's more a word from the Lord for the contemporary church.